So good morning everybody, I'm delighted to be here almost afternoon now. So we'll just get started. I'll talk to the first couple of slides and then I'll pass over to Maurice. We're just going to introduce to you a resource that we developed, kind of specifically focused for mental health populations, but really applicable right across the board, and certainly everything we've been hearing this morning in terms of an older age group, it's certainly applicable there. So we'll talk about how we kind of devised and developed this guideline, what it consists of, and hopefully you'll see how it could be applicable across your field, and perhaps you could develop your own resource or certainly access this as well. So just as a quick background to it, we know that 1 in 5 people live with mental illness, so it's extremely prevalent. People with mental illness can die up to 18 years earlier than the general population. So we know that there is a significant mortality gap, especially when we talk about severe mental illness. This gap in life expectancy is mainly due to physical health issues. So about 70% of the reasons that people die earlier in severe mental illness is due to physical health reasons. So we see that there's a big unmet need there in terms of addressing these physical health concerns. So we know now there is a huge problem. The challenge now is to bridge the implementation gap. It's to devise resources, to devise strategies, services, etc., so that this physical health need can be addressed in this population. So we see this resource as being kind of one small step, one brave little step here in Ireland that we've developed to try and bridge this implementation gap. So to try and talk to put something in place to address the need. So the aim of this guideline then is to support staff to promote awareness of the benefits of physical activity as a powerful therapeutic tool for people with mental health difficulties, and provide practical resources and strategies to support service users to incorporate meaningful physical activity into their daily lives. So really, I suppose we're coming from maybe an area that there hasn't been a huge focus on physical health. People who work in the mental health arena, understandably tend to focus more specifically on the mental health of their clients and service users, and maybe didn't have the confidence, didn't have the resources, didn't have the knowledge to be able to kind of give meaningful advice to their clients about physical activity. So we hoped that this resource would empower them to have meaningful conversations around physical activity. And so this is what it looks like. We have a couple of copies today, and it's downloadable from the website. So this is how we structured it. First of all, we first chapter was, what do we mean by physical activity? So we kind of came from the basis that maybe people knew very little about physical activity. So we introduced the concept, what it is, what are the benefits, and we had, these guidelines are orientated, as I said, to the mental health arena. So we tried to kind of have that slant in terms of what we were, the focus. We talk about how much physical activity is advised, and then the main part is practical tips and resources, so that the guideline can be picked up, opened up, and staff can just pick out what's relevant for them and their client base. So we used MEC, which is Making Every Contact Count. We kind of based some of the physical activity advice on that. So if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of a tool or framework for advising about physical activity, from very kind of limited and very brief conversation to a very focused intervention. So it's kind of on a spectrum of very, very short and only a couple of seconds just as a reminder, to something which is in depth and maybe takes more of a therapeutic knowledge to implement. But we talk about things like the talk test to try and kind of advise in terms of how much effort the client users should put into exercise. So it should be medium effort or higher effort, hopefully. But I suppose a huge focus that we try to get across with this is some is better than none. So we're in this kind of mental health arena. We're talking about people, some of whom are very sedentary and do very little exercise, and very, very maybe spend a lot of time indoors, spend a lot of time sleeping, spend a lot of time resting, etc. So we're really trying to get the message across that some is better than none. Even doing a very small bit is so much better than doing nothing at all. And to congratulate your clients, your service users, if they start doing something and replace complete sedentary behaviour with doing a little bit. But we try to cater for the spectrum of activity, that some people are more active, and if they are, then we're aiming for these people to meet the guidelines and stick with the guidelines. So in over across a number of pages, we felt this was important, that we put in barriers and then ideas of how to get around the barriers. So again, some of them are a mental health focus and some are quite general. So one like, I'll be too embarrassed, I don't like exercising. So, if a client says that to you in the consultation, that you're not kind of stuck, what will I say to them? I don't know how to address that. So potential barriers that people might identify when you're having that conversation, that you can kind of steer the conversation in a positive way, depending on what they say. So we list a whole load of different barriers related to the environment, personal, based on no money, no time, etc., etc. So all the kind of common barriers, and then mental health focus barriers to try and guide the conversation meaningfully around it. Now this was a really important part of the guideline, that we had very real service user input into it. We convened a focus group with about 5 mental health service users. And this took place over a whole morning, actually it took, and we really tried to and Maurice was there as well, and actually was one of my favourite parts of the guideline was involving the service users in this part, and I felt it was one of the most important parts as well. So we asked them, look, what would you like us to say? If staff are having a conversation to you about physical activity or exercise, what should we not say? What should we say? What would be helpful? What do you do that you find beneficial, etc., etc. So then it took quite a long time from the other co-author, Jonathan Moore, and he went through transcribed what was said in the focus groups, and then we pulled out kind of meaningful quotes, and we then wove them right through the guidelines. So there's little speech bubbles all the way through, and we tried to kind of base the guidelines on what they said, but also then to weave what they said into it. So we changed the names, obviously, and the photos don't correspond to the people. But we just picked out little nuggets, such as this one here, for example. I kept meaning to go swimming and it didn't happen. So she, who was actually the psychologist in this case, just said, right, tomorrow, go. And I thought, yeah, and she said, no, text me before, text me after. And this is what happened the first couple of times, and then this person got back to doing an activity they loved previously. So it's just giving some little resources to people who are reading the guideline and giving a flavour of what's useful for service users. And actually, interestingly, walking was a big theme that came across relevant to today. So this person said, I have a walking group every Wednesday and we meet outside the clinic. It's very good, it's very healthy. So walking groups and setting up walking groups was found to be a really useful and meaningful activity that promoted social engagement as well, and was really favoured by service users from the focus group. And just also we had a service user on the steering group as well for this guideline. Then also at the back of the guideline we have examples from practice. So we tried to make it as kind of colourful and practical as possible, so it's not just a load of text that people find hard to read, and that it's kind of rooted in what's going on, and I suppose giving showing that there is some really good stuff out there, and this is examples of what can be done with limited resources. So this was a group from Skibbereen, the Happy Feet Walking Group. So it is, and Maurice organised this part, so we spoke to people who ran certain groups. Some were gardening groups, walking groups, activity in an inpatient facility, various examples of practice. And the people who run these groups then wrote a little piece about it and how it worked, so that people reading the guidelines can see, okay, look, these are ideas of what we can actually do in our centre. And then at the end of each chapter we had key messages which can be kind of flipped back on. Okay? And then at the very end we had some resources that hopefully people will find beneficial. So these are from already, we weren't kind of reinventing the wheel. These are, we just incorporated some resources that were already available. I suppose the first thing we put in was the PARQ, which is the Physical Activity Screening Questionnaire. So it can identify if there are kind of, if there are medical or other reasons why, we need to be a little bit cautious about advising people to be physically active. So that's useful. And then we included resources that are already available from Get Active Ireland, a physical activity diary, so that you could sit down and do this with your clients, and then various handouts. For instance, you could photocopy this or download it, and list the pros, list the cons of being more active. And it gives structure to the consultation and helps maybe structure it a little bit more. Another one is obstacles I may encounter, and then possible solutions, to get people thinking around how they might get over those obstacles. And then we also developed a leaflet again, which is available online. So just a handout, so that if service users are having a conversation, they can download the handout and give it to them. So it just summarises the guideline. And that's really it in a nutshell. My co-author with it was Dr. Jonathan Moore in TCD, and it was a really, really valuable assistance of a steering group who had a vision for this guideline, and we wrote various drafts, and they tore them apart and rewrote them, and that's how it went. But it was a really, really useful and consultative process. And then Maurice, who's speaking now, project managed the whole thing. So it was a good team together. So hopefully you may find the resource useful, and I'm happy to take any questions later.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. I'm going to speak about our experience on the ground, implementing some of the key messages from the guidelines document. In Louth Mental Health Services, the occupational therapy staff have developed a number of initiatives which involve physical activity as a key component. So, for example, in the community, we have a Kickstarter recovery program, which is a football-based program with the FAI, mostly for young people with schizophrenia. We have a Walking for Wellbeing program, which is an adaptation of a Mood Walks, which is a kind of Canadian idea, which is about walking, mindfulness and nature. We have a couple of Learn to Run programs, one with the child and adolescent psychiatry teams and one with the adult mental health services. And also we have lifestyle programs which kind of integrate kind of a walking program with kind of peer discussion, education and kind of taster activities in the community where people live. So depending on what's available where they live, whether that's yoga or tennis, and the group will have a big input into what they want to do. Our experience has been that the interest, take up and feedback on physical activity initiatives in a secondary mental health service is very positive, and that people, both staff and service users, see that it has a role in recovery as well as physical and mental well-being. Just some of my reflections in terms of partnerships, which are really emphasised in the guidelines in chapters 4 and 5. And I want to, I suppose, put up some of the people that we partner with. I want to maybe mention particularly this local sports partnership, and maybe some of you also link with them in your own fields. We found that they have been very generous in terms of sharing their knowledge of programme delivery, supporting us with coaches, supporting us with accessing community facilities, helping us to avail of small grants, and organising walking leader training as well for our staff. I would say that they're a key ally for anybody interested in physical activity, no matter what area you're working in. Another reflection is about, in terms of partnership, is about using what you have in your own community. There was a mapping survey we were involved with a couple of years ago around what physical activity initiatives were happening in mental health services, and I suppose when we mapped it out, there was a lovely local feel to what came back. So in Dungarvan and Waterford there was a surfing and mental health initiative, there was a cycling initiative on the River Barrow in County Carlow. People might be familiar with the Woodlands programme, which is Quilcha and the mental health services in Wicklow working together in a walking programme. And we find that it's very important to people who take part in our Walking for Wellbeing programme that it is out in their own community, that it's a hill of Tara, that it's walks around Trim, and people value that sense that I'm doing something therapeutic but in an everyday place, and particularly the benefits of a natural environment that was mentioned earlier. I'd second that. Just another reflection is that in mental health services, our service users can be very marginalised. And for staff to think about the importance for staff to build relationships with the community, and for staff not only to focus on their professional skills but also to think about, can they build relationships and links, and can they increase their own knowledge of what is out there in the community that they can then use as a resource for the people that access our services. We found that often there's many people who come to our services. Yes, we can signpost them to what's going on in the community, and it's very important to have an awareness of that. But there are, a significant cohort of people with a more serious mental illness that it is necessary to partner up and maybe provide specific programs initially as a bridge for people to maybe get back into doing things in the community again. So that's just some of our learning. A second point, I suppose, I want to emphasise is collaboration, which again, chapter 4 in the guidelines really emphasises. Within mental health services, I've put up the National Framework for Recovery and Mental Health, I suppose, is a key strategic document at the moment. And it talks about, its vision for a more outward-looking mental health service in Ireland that's person-centred and supports self-management. And I think, again, that's what our guidelines document is trying to support, is self-management. It's not a prescribing, there's not a lot of advising. It is about a conversation when we're working with individuals, listening to them, and hearing what their motivation is to be more active, coaching them to kind of problem solve maybe the barriers that might be there for them in their lives, and supporting them with their own plan. So like in the example that Julie put up with the psychologist, sometimes initially the OT maybe providing some of the external motivation for the person, but if the activity that the person is engaging with is meaningful and it's something they enjoy, it becomes habitual and it becomes sustainable. And I think that's something you have to plan for as a therapist, or otherwise at the end of a 12-week programme or an 8-week programme, things reverse very quickly. So I'm just moving quickly here. Just want to mention goal setting. So goal setting, whether we're working individually with people or we're working with groups, we would always do individual goal setting at the beginning. I'll give an example. I facilitated the Kickstarter Recovery Football Programme with an FBI coach, and by meeting the individuals coming to the group, if I'm aware that for somebody that really, yes, they'd like to be more active, but their main goal is to meet people, I can obviously integrate that into how we plan the session, so that there'll be drills, football drills that will be getting to know other people. There'll be water breaks strategically timed so people get to mix on the sidelines. And similarly, if somebody is coming to the group who's more focused on their football skills, I can link with the coach and ensure that they get what they need out of the group. Just another shout out for walking. On an individual level, we found that that's where people want to start, and that's where it sits so well with lots of people. It sits well with the move more, sit less message from the document. And by working with people around walking, you can build confidence very quickly. People see benefits in their own lives. That can be very individual for people because it has so many benefits. At the moment, we're collaborating with Professor Sam McDonough from the RCSI and Sarah House, who's here from the University of Ulster Jordanstown, and some other colleagues on doing a Walking for Mental Health research intervention. So it's a coaching intervention with a group walk, and it's being run as a feasibility study on both sides of the border. So we've been recruiting and we started the intervention, and so far so good. I think Sarah, the feedback is positive. So hopefully we'll be telling you more about that at a later date. I put up outcome measures, and like I suppose what Professor Maurice said this morning, the watches, the wrist-worn activity counters, they're fabulous tool. They're a massive motivational tool as well as an outcome measure. They're an intervention, I think, in themselves, and now they're very cheap. And I think the ones we were using in our study cost less than €20 perhaps, and they link with an app on your phone, so you can obsess over your data if you're interested. Other outcome measures, just I suppose going back to the piece about setting individual goals. So we've used a goal attainment scale with mixed results. It tends to work better if the therapist is setting the goal, and that's not what we want usually. But as occupational therapists, we've often used the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure adapted to set individual goals with people, and that has worked very well. Obviously, getting feedback from the group and listening to what the service users are saying and hearing their voice, and then using that to plan the next programme is very important. Again, if you link with a sports partnership, in terms of they've given us so much, but one thing that they've valued that we've given them back is actually reports back on what we're doing, and that they look to see outcome measures before and after. It's not something that's been part of their culture, and I think Sport Ireland are looking for it more now, and it's something that I suppose that we tend to do, and allows us both to reflect and think together about things. So just lastly about outcome measures, when you're starting off, I know running the Learn to Run programme in a CAM setting where you have a lot of teenagers with fairly risky behaviour and maybe fairly concerning mental health difficulties, that the team were supportive but a little bit sceptical, and certainly the outcome measures afterwards and seeing the results of the programme and the feedback was very important. And one of the changes that we hadn't expected so much was about self-efficacy, by working towards a 5 kilometre local tower run, that the young people got huge self-confidence from that, and the belief that, gosh, if I could do that, maybe I could get back to school, or I could do it, some of the other issues that they were facing in their lives at the time. So one of the last things I suppose I want to mention is about, I'm talking a lot about community settings, but if you work in a service where you have a residential setting, I think there's an extra onus on us to think about physical activity. We obviously have a Department of Psychiatry, which I've put up there, which is an acute mental health setting, but also in mental health there's a lot of community residences, and they've sometimes been described as mini institutions where people are in the community but often in kind of a setting that doesn't really support recovery and independence. And what you can find in a lot of those kind of community set residences is that people often aren't allowed in the kitchen, for instance, for health and safety reasons. And I think if you think yourselves at home, kitchen is where you're on your feet. That's where you're less sedentary. You're cleaning up. You're always something to do. You're pulling things out of dishwashers. You're loading washing machines. Whereas if you're in a sitting room, you're sitting, and if you're in your bedroom, you're flopped on the bed. So that piece again, that Professor Mara was talking about earlier about the design of environments in terms of cities, it's also about the design of our residential settings and the culture that's within the residential settings, and that it's a lot more difficult, I suppose, to change, and it needs more buy-in than perhaps doing a community initiative, but it's really important, I would say. So just to finish up, I think the last slide I just had put some quotes from participants from some of our programs. Again, I suppose it's really trying to emphasise that physical activity benefits, and the programs that we do can be used in so many ways to support mental health recovery, as well as positive physical health and mental health. So thank you very much.